excellent day for an exorcism.
I'm telling you that thing upstairs isn't my daughter.
Welcome to Deconstructing, where I take apart an iconic horror movie to find out what makes it tick. In 1973, the world of horror cinema changed forever with the release of one unforgettable film. Based on a best-selling novel by William Peter Blatty, it became one of the first true blockbusters, as millions of moviegoers nationwide stood in line for hours to see what many claimed was the most terrifying film ever made. It's now considered one of the most important films of the 20th century, and it spawned 2 official sequels, 2 simultaneous prequels, and a hit TV series. Unlike our previous deconstructing subjects, The Exorcist's reputation extends far beyond the horror sphere, and it's now considered a major landmark in movie history. At a time when major studio films opened at just a handful of theaters in their first week, word of mouth spread so rapidly after its premiere that theaters couldn't keep up with the demand. Never before had a horror movie drawn such massive crowds. So how did this shocking phenomenon get started? That's what we're going to talk about in today's episode. As usual, I'll touch on many aspects of this horror classic, but I'll mainly be focusing on 3 elements. Origin, wherein I trace the film's roots back to Blatty's novel and the real-life incident that inspired it. Legacy, as we measure its impact on movie history and popular culture. And mystery, in which I'll be delving into some notorious rumors surrounding its production and release. So grab some holy water and a crucifix, no, not that crucifix, and get ready for a trip to hell and back as we deconstruct The Exorcist.
The power of Christ compels you!
Oddly enough, William Peter Blatty had previously found success as a comedy writer and had written many books and screenplays before striking gold with his first horror novel in 1971. He was inspired by a news story he first read back in 1949 when he was a student at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. The story described an exorcism performed on a 14-year-old boy, and the details of the incident were bizarre, shocking, and corroborated by several witnesses. Blatty had always been fascinated by the case and conceived a fictional version, approaching the subject more like a spiritual murder mystery than a supernatural horror story. Not long after its publication, The Exorcist rocketed to the top of the New York Times bestseller list, and the controversy surrounding the events in the book only served to boost sales even higher. It was just a matter of time before Hollywood came knocking. Blatty himself wrote the first draft of the screenplay and showed it to Friedkin, whose Oscar-winning thriller The French Connection had made a strong impression on the author. Ironically, Friedkin hated Blatty's first draft, and they worked closely together on a complete rewrite. The final script focuses more on fleshing out the main characters, and establishes a kind of calm before the storm build-up before the terror of the possession scenes kicks in. While today's horror fans might not have the patience for this slow burn pacing, the formula definitely worked on audiences in 1973 who'd never before seen anything so shocking on a movie screen. A new era in horror cinema had arrived, and there was no turning back. Like many of the titles we've deconstructed, The Exorcist has been the subject of critical analysis, fan adoration, and even theological studies. But I'm most fascinated by its impact on popular culture. Even people who never saw the film can describe its most infamous moments. Ask anyone, they'll tell you about the spinning head, and the projectile vomiting, and then there's this. The crucifix scene was even more graphic in the novel, but Blatty didn't create it purely for shock value. He took the term profane literally, as the desecration of a religious symbol, while also violating the innocence of young Regan MacNeil. But when it came to the movie, not everyone understood that intention.
You know what she did?
Almost half a century later, this scene still provokes screams and gasps from first-time viewers. Never before had an R-rated horror film scored so big at the box office, and The Exorcist held that honor for 44 years, finally taken down by It Chapter 1, which, by the way, was also released by Warner Brothers. I guess they learned their lesson? It was also the first horror film to be nominated for a Best Picture Oscar, with 10 Academy Award nominations in all, and 2 well-deserved wins, Best Adapted Screenplay and Best Sound. Needless to say, the call for a sequel was growing louder, and Warner raced to meet the demand. The original script for Exorcist 2 was ambitious and cerebral, and it might have actually worked. But endless rewrites and studio meddling turned it into an incomprehensible mess. It's still kind of fun to watch, though.
soul is mine.
When a horror film grows far beyond simple entertainment and becomes a part of our cultural history, it begins to take on a mythical status, and there's no better example of this than The Exorcist. Let's take a look at some of the more intriguing questions that have emerged since its premiere in 1973. As with many studio releases in the 1970s, the advanced teaser for The Exorcist contains very little footage from the film itself. In fact, the only shot used is the iconic arrival of Father Merrin at the McNeil house. The rest is comprised of production stills in a semi-animated style. But this teaser generated its own controversy, and I guess I can understand why. When the trailer was attached to other Warner releases, audiences were unaccustomed to such extreme imagery in a mainstream film. This led to many fans claiming that the studio banned the teaser altogether. That's not entirely true. Yes, it was pulled from some theaters by the individual owners, but it continued to screen elsewhere until the arrival of the full trailer. It's widely known that William Friedkin went to extreme lengths to enhance the psychological impact of The Exorcist on viewers, but there's still debate over how often he employed subliminal imagery and sound designed to provoke a response in the viewer's subconscious. The best known example is this demonic face, which was actually an early makeup test on Linda Blair's double, Eileen Dietz. Technically, that doesn't qualify as subliminal since we consciously see it, albeit briefly. Friedkin denied any other deliberate flash frames in the film's original release, but added several of them to the extended director's cut, released in 2000 as The Version You've Never Seen. Friedkin definitely manipulated the film's sound design to keep viewers on edge. For example, the buzzing of bees and the squealing of slaughtered pigs are embedded in the soundtrack, which Friedkin claimed to provoke an instinctive fight or flight reaction in the viewer.
It just scared me to death. Things just like this really scared me to death.
I fainted like 10 minutes after the first beginning of the movie.
My legs are just going, and I want to go in the lobby and not watch it, and I have to cover my ears.
And I started closing my eyes, and I could hear the gagging, and I was getting sicker, and I walked up the aisle with my friend, and I was just ready to pass out.
Are you going to go back in and see more of the movie now?
Probably, yeah.
The fact that people do wait 4 hours in line and then go back in to see more after they've fainted or gotten sick, I guess it shows how far some people will go for the thrill of being chilled to the bone.
From day one of its release, stories about The Exorcist were making front-page headlines, not just about the massive crowds lined up to see it, but for the extreme reactions of audience members. This included reports of viewers fainting, vomiting, and running from the theater in terror. Most of these accounts were true, but the most intense reactions didn't come from the film's demonic scenes. The moment that provoked the most intense reactions was the scene where Regan is subjected to an angiogram, an invasive and painful procedure depicted here in unflinching detail. Even today, it still makes audiences squirm. By now, we all know the name of the demon that possessed Regan, and while he's never mentioned in the film by name, Blatty explicitly calls him Pazuzu in the novel. While many viewers assume the demon is a fictional character, Blatty took the name from ancient Assyrian religious writings dating back nearly 3,000 years, which depict Pazuzu as the demon of the southwest wind. According to myth, his influence could be good or evil, but I'm pretty sure you can guess which side he's on this time. Do you remember your first experience with The Exorcist? Do you think it still holds up today? Or has it been overshadowed by more modern scares? Let us know in the comments, along with your own favorite bits of trivia. And while you're here, be sure to give this video a like and ring the little bell to subscribe for more original JoBlo horror content.